Hey, thank you so much for joining us at our Crosspoint Church podcast. Now, if you're new to our podcast or maybe new to our church in general, we're just a bunch of messed up people who don't have it all together, running after a heavenly leader who loves us and meets us right where we are. We hope this message encourages you, builds your faith, and strengthens your confidence as you continue down this journey of what it means to know and follow Jesus. Enjoy this message.
Oh man, two guys, they're sales guys, Nikki and Billy, they lose their jobs and creates all kinds of stress in their lives. And so they decide to go back and do an internship with Google. And not only in the midst of that do they redefine their lives, but they actually model for us some key leads on what it means to raise the next generation with a sustainability and a stability that allows them to actually thrive in the midst of circumstances. So we're actually going to look at that this weekend. So welcome to Crosspoint. Really excited to have you with us this weekend. My name's Curt. If you are here for the first time this weekend, we just want you to know we are so excited that you've chosen to be with us this weekend. And we're excited to see all of you across all of our platforms, including those online. Let's make some noise, share some love with those in the online spaces this weekend. So excited to have you tune in from wherever you're tuning in from. And we just want you to know we think church is not a place or a time on a calendar. It's actually a group of people that are going after Jesus. So we want you to know you're with us this weekend. You're not just watching with us. So we're in part 4 of this series, Under the Circumstances. And we're talking about how to hold on to God when it appears that God is no longer holding on to you. And so we've been kind of exploring this question over the last few weeks. And when I say exploring, I really do mean exploring. I mean, we haven't been answering this. We've been exploring it. And here's the question. What do our circumstances say about the love of God? Meaning, what do we believe based on our circumstances, good or bad, about the presence of God or, even like the existence of God? And what kind of conclusions do we come to? And so we've been kind of exploring that over the last 3 weeks and really getting to some really cool places. Now, today, we're going to kind of make a turn and we're going to talk about how to build a sustainable faith in the next generation. And the kind of faith that actually has the ability to navigate difficult circumstances when the weight of life hits. And this is something we see in these two guys, Nikki and Billy, in this movie, The Internship. I mean, seriously, this is like one of my all-time favorite movies. We watch it in our home all the time. I could do a whole series on The Internship. You guys want a series on The Internship sometime? Okay. About 6 of you do, so we'll put it on the list. But the cool thing is, they're down on their luck. They're experiencing difficult things, and we see in the midst of this, they actually have tools to reinvent themselves and to actually sustain through some of the difficult storms of life. And we see that this mindset that they have actually pays off. And this is something we want to build into the younger generation. In fact, I want you to take a look at another scene here from The Internship. That right there is what I actually want us to look at this week. How do we turn a disadvantage into an advantage? How do we help the next generation turn a disadvantage into an advantage? How do we raise a generation that actually has the ability to move through those seasons and actually come out on the other side? And so we're going to look at this today, and the reality is we all have a role to play in this. And so, whatever your role is with the younger generation, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, maybe you're a mentor, maybe you're an uncle or an aunt, or maybe an employer, perhaps you work in education, even higher education, maybe you're a student, maybe you're here as a student, there are going to be takeaways for you as a student today. But what I want us to see is that we all have the ability to actually embrace and lift up the younger generation. Now, to do this, we're going to be looking at a lot of data from one of my favorite thought leaders on the next generation, a guy by the name of Tim Elmore, and he has one of my favorite blogs, but it's changed. So if you've seen this before, you may want to take a screenshot because his blog has changed. So here's what it is right here. It's growingleaders.com/ which that hasn't changed. That never gets old, by the way. And then here's the change part: get-updates-via-email. If you go to that website, you will actually be able to subscribe to Dr. Elmore's blog. And so I'm going to share some things from his research and just all the work he does with companies and with sports teams in how to coach and raise up the upcoming generation. And I'm going to share some of our personal experiences, some of my wife and my personal experiences. We have 4 children. If you've not met my family, I'm going to show you a picture of my family right here so you know they're real. Our youngest, Meredith, is 15. She's a freshman across the street at HSC High School. Our next daughter is 18, and she's going to be graduating here in a couple weeks from HSC High School, from high school. And then our son is a rising senior at a university here locally. And then our oldest daughter, Macy, Macy is 23, and she is now in the corporate world. And she also works for us here at Crosspoint. And so I'm going to share some of our failures. I'm going to share some of the things we've learned, some of our successes. And there's another influence in this. There's something called the Nurtured Heart approach to parenting that we provide a couple times a year through one of our partners, the Shift Initiative. And this is a great just class on how to parent in a way that nurtures the student. So that's going to be kind of woven into this as well. Now, for me, perhaps one of my most defining moments in my parenting career, it happened back in 2021. And my oldest daughter, Macy, she was a freshman in her first year of university. And this was right after the pandemic had hit, about 10 months in. She graduated. She was the class that graduated under the pandemic, and so didn't really have a graduation like everyone else. Went to school under that same way. I mean, her first year, second year of college was not at all what the normal college experience usually is. And so she came home for a holiday and then went back in January 2021 and really struggled kind of going back. It's kind of like, man, I don't know. This has been so hard. But she went back to campus, and we get a call from her right before classes start. It was like January 10th, let's say, winter night, about 9:30. She calls us and she says, Mom and Dad, I can't do this. I need you to come pick me up right now. And we're like, okay, what's going on? And she's like, well, they're getting ready to quarantine my entire dorm tonight at 10 p.m. Everybody that's in the dorm has got to stay for like an indefinite number of days. I can't do this. I can't handle this. I need you to come get me right now. I've got my clothes packed. I'm getting ready to walk and wait for you on the curb. And so we're like, okay, hang on just a moment. And she said, no, I'm ready to go. I don't care how long it takes you to get down here. Now, let me remind you, it's like January 10th. I think it was like 11 degrees at the time. All right, she's like, I'm going to go stand on the curb and wait for you until you come. And I looked across the room at my wife, and we both kind of shook our heads and then said, honey, I'm so sorry, but we're not going to come down and get you. And you could hear her heartbreak across the phone. And of course, as a parent, I'm going, oh my gosh, is this going to create counseling in the future? Is she going to feel abandoned? I mean, what kind of damage is being done? And wanting to help her, wanting to rescue her in this moment, and yet at the same time realizing that I don't know that that's what's best right here. And so we kind of talked her off that ledge a bit and, just said to her, hey, you can do this. And we've prepared you for moments like this. And you can do hard things. And one day, this is going to be a one-sentence summary in your life story. And you may even laugh about it, which was so ironic because earlier this week when I said, hey, Macy, could I tell this story? We kind of laughed about it just a few years later. Now, here was the cool part. 3 days later, we get a call from her, and she's like, this has been the best weekend ever, because they were quarantined in the dorm. And what they did is brought video games and all kinds of carry-out and pizzas in all weekend long. It was like a party at the school on somebody else's dime, right? And so it turned into a fantastic weekend and one of the most fun weekends she'd had all year. But I tell you that story because so many times we find ourselves in places where we want to go in and rescue. In fact, I had an opportunity to talk with Dr. Elmore a few years ago, spend a couple Zooms with him. And I asked him a question. I said, Tim, if you could do the parenting journey over, because all of his kids were grown, I said, what's one thing that you would do different the next time? And he thought about it for a moment, and then he said this. He said, I'd risk more, and I'd rescue less. He said, I'd risk more, and I'd be a lot slower and hesitant to rescue. And this kind of begs the question, as parents, why do we rescue so quickly? I've had to ask myself that question. And part of that's because we live in a complicated world, and we know the weight of life, and we know the weight of circumstances. We want to do our best to not allow those to impact our children. Now, I think we would all say that the world is complicated, even complex. In fact, we'd probably say, gosh, it's always been complicated, all the way back to maybe, if you were a previous generation, it was complicated back then. But I think that just the dynamics that are going on in our world today, it's different right now. And so I want to kind of explain the difference between complicated and complex. It's always been a complicated world. Now, complicated, think about it this way. Think about complicated being a really difficult math problem up on a board that takes multiple steps to complete. And so you approach that board and you're working on that math problem, and it's very complicated, and one step after another, and you work on it for a half hour, and you get to the place where I need to take a break. And so you put your pen down, and you go and you take a nap, you have a little lunch. When you come back to that math problem, you're going to pick it up right where you left it off. And it's still going to have a number of complicated steps to get it completion, but it's going to be in the same place that you left it. That's complicated. Now, complex, on the other hand, think about complex as being sitting in an air traffic controller seat. All right, at a busy airport, your goal is to help planes land and take off. Complex would be if you decide in the midst of of your shift to say, you know what, I need to take a break right now. I'm going to take a 30-minute break, go have some dinner, maybe take a little rest, and then I'll come back. When you come back to that seat right there, all of a sudden, not only are things not where you left them, but things have got incredibly complex over the 30 minutes and difficult, and you're going to have to unwind and untwine and unravel all the things that you've created by taking a short time off. That's complex. And so, I think as we look at the world today, and you may or may not agree with this, but I think we just live in a very, very complex world. And I think our students feel this. And in fact, one of my favorite books in terms of how do we equip, not only ourselves, but really the next generation is a book called Mindset. And this is a book by Carol Dweck. And she talks about how, we all have either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And, a fixed mindset is basically this idea that, we believe that our basic abilities, intelligence, and our talents are fixed traits. All right, I've got it. It's all within me. I just need to draw on it. I need to pull it up and use it when I need it. That's a fixed mindset. Whereas on the other hand, a growth mindset is when we understand that our talents and our abilities can actually be developed through effort, through good teaching, and through persistence. And what that means is I don't have everything I need, and there come seasons where I actually have to put effort in to actually grow, to develop the skills that I need. Now, I want to read you something from the author of this book because she actually talks to parents quite a bit. It's a great book on sports and arts and, parenting and faith. And these are available at Connection Point, by the way. If you want to pick one of these up, they're for sale out there. If you can't afford it, just take it with you. But I'd encourage you. It's one of our next steps. Maybe you want to pick this book up. Here's what she says to parents. She says, a lot of times as parents, we want to do the right thing and build our children up. But she says, parents think that they can hand children permanent confidence, like a gift, by praising their brains and their talent. It doesn't work that way. In fact, it has the opposite effect. It makes children doubt themselves as soon as anything is hard or anything goes wrong. If parents want to give their children a gift, then the best thing they can do is to teach their children to love challenges, to be intrigued by mistakes, to enjoy effort, and to keep on learning. That way, their children don't have to be slaves to praise. And then look at this last sentence. They will have a lifelong way to build and repair their own confidence. Over the last year, each one of my kids, 15, 18, 21, and 23, each of them have had significant moments where they've had to repair their confidence. And, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I want you to just ask yourself, where in my life, and again, don't put your hand up, but ask yourself, how many of us over the last year have been in a season where we've had to repair our confidence? And of course, the question that is, how did you do? And were you equipped for that? Did you have the tools that you needed to be able to do that? That's what's needed in a complex world. And so this is one of the reasons that preparing the next generation with a sustainable faith is so important. Because, see, we've been saying through this whole series, when things are up and to the right, it's easy to look at God and go, oh my gosh, look at God move, and God is good, and I'm so excited at all the things he's doing. But when circumstances hit and things are down and to the right and not exactly going the way that we want, we all ask the same question. We put our hands up. We say, okay, God, where are you? And so when you flip through the pages of history, one of the things we begin to see is there are people throughout the ages that have had a sustainable faith. And they've had a growth mindset. And one of the things that growth mindset does is it allows them to see that, hey, I don't have everything within me. I have to grow and work at those things. But there is new information and new discoveries and new opportunities out there. And I can actually choose to overcome and endure the circumstances, whatever might come my way. Now, one of the guys we like to talk about a lot around here is a guy by the name of the Apostle Paul. And we find him in the New Testament part of the Bible, and he is a guy that is a champion of the growth mindset. In fact, Paul himself has a growth mindset. If you're not familiar with Paul, he's a guy who didn't grow up in a home that talked about Jesus. In fact, he grew up in a home that was actually against the movement of what Jesus came to do. And Paul, as an adult, began to like physically and emotionally and even in leadership go against the group and the disciples of Jesus. He was actually arresting Christians, putting them in jail. And one day, something changed for him. Something clicked. He encountered the real Jesus and saw who the real Jesus actually was and experienced his character. And as a result of that, Paul changed his mind. In fact, some of his friends were like, dang, Paul, I thought you were against this whole thing. He's like, I was, but I came into new information and everything changed for him because he had a growth mindset. And so Paul then starts writing these letters that we find all throughout the New Testament. And I want to read you one that he writes to these new Christians in this group known as Caesarea Philippi. Here's what he writes. He says, I pray that you will keep on growing. All right, that's the growth mindset right there. All right, you're going to have to put some work into this. You're going to have to put some energy into this. I pray that you keep growing in knowledge. Now, what is knowledge? All right, knowledge is discoveries. It's data. It's facts. It's also awareness of the way things are around me. All right, he says, I want you to grow in knowledge and in understanding. And understanding, what's that? That's taking the data, taking my awareness, and actually making applications with it, right? Taking the knowledge and the understanding and doing something, facilitating, taking it somewhere. For I want you to understand what really matters so that you may live pure and live blameless lives until the day of Christ's return. I mean, what Paul's saying right here is he's saying, hey, the moment you stop learning, you surrender to not growing. I want you to be learning. I want you to be constantly growing in your knowledge and in your application. Listen, I want to tell you something. The fact that you're here right here, you know what I see in you right now? The fact that you're sitting here in this room, the fact that you're tuning in online this weekend, you're joining us online, that tells me that you are actually in a growth mindset. That tells me you're in a growth posture. That tells me that you actually want to grow somewhere because you didn't have to do this. There's a 100 number of things you could have been doing right now, but you did something intentional to actually be in this space right now. So I want to talk about intentionality a little bit. Well, what does intentionality have to do with building a sustainable faith in the next generation? Well, intentionality is simply choosing, think about this, it's choosing to not just sit back and let things happen. And so how do we do this? How do we actually be intentional in developing the faith of, the sustaining faith of the next generation? One of the things that we have to do, we have to process through, is we have to think through the metrics of what this looks like. And so the big idea I want us to think through on this, and I'm going to give you some steps on this, is this involves changing the parenting report card. All right, changing the parenting report card. Now, Dr. Elmore would say, hey, it used to be that, man, you were a good parent if you just said, hey, I want to provide everything my kids need, right? And people around you go, oh, man, that's awesome. I'm so glad you did that. I didn't experience that growing up, but I want to do that for my kids. And that was awesome. Now, the new report card, kind of the new report card today is you're a good parent if you give your kids everything they want. You know what I'm saying? And maybe that's not always true. Well, let's be honest. On the north side of Indy here in Fishers and surrounding communities, that's the way it works, right? I mean, anybody agree with me on that? All right, like two of you. All right, two of you are fans of this. All right, so here's the dilemma. All right, we look at this and we see, okay, that must be what good parenting looks like. I've got to give my kids everything they want. I've got to remove hardship. I've got to make sure they don't go through anything difficult. I mean, what mom wouldn't want to remove hardship? What parent wouldn't want to, make sure my kids don't fall under the weight of the circumstances? But we have to change our mindset on this. We have to change the report card on this. And we have to begin thinking, here's the shift we have to make. We have to go from protecting to preparing. All right? We have to change the way we see our children, all right? And what I mean by that is we have to say, okay, I'm not just raising a child. If we're raising a child, we're just going to work to protect them. But we say, no, I'm actually raising a future adult, contributing adult, which means we take a different mindset because we say, okay, well, that requires that I prepare. And so we have to change the scorecard. So I'm going to give you some scorecard changes, some things for us to think through that allow us to actually build sustainable faith. You guys ready for this? All right, here we go. First one, we have to put our focus on progress instead of perfection. Progress instead of perfection. One of the greatest roles we can have in raising up the next generation is to help them see the progress. In fact, Dr. Elmore would even say that one of our main roles as adults is not for information. Listen, kids, students have information at their fingertips. What they need is interpretation of the information. All right, so what the greatest role we can play is to actually interpret their progress. Now, here's something fascinating. Back in the 1960s, there was a guy by the name of Martin Seligman, and he started studying this thing called learned helplessness. All right, learned helplessness. Now, here's what learned helplessness is. This is when students feel like their effort is hopeless, and when they feel hopeless, they begin to feel helpless. All right, now what that means, because you've done this as well, is when you work at something really, really hard and you try and you try and you try, but you don't get the result that you want. It's like the rats in the little research. They hit the lever and no food comes out. They hit the lever again, no food comes out. They hit the lever again, guess what? They're going to quit hitting the lever at some point if they don't get a reward for what they thought was coming their way. And so Dr. Seligman says basically we learn helplessness in these situations. All right, we learn that, oh my gosh, okay, this isn't paying off, so I need to quit. And so as parents, one of our jobs is to actually interpret progress. Now, let me give you an example of this from our family recently. Our 15-year-old daughter, Meredith, she's in high school now, and this spring, she decided to try out for the tennis team. And she's been playing tennis for about 2 years, but we had no idea if she was going to make the tennis team because this is a huge high school, and we live in one of the most competitive counties, not only in the state, but I would say in the region and even in the country. I mean, we have some of the best players across all sports disciplines right here in Hamilton County. And so we were just like, man, we hope she makes the team. She's been playing a couple years. We have no idea what that takes. And so she goes to tryouts, and she comes home. She's like, I made the team, and we just like did a big exhale. We were so excited. And so, she's practicing and she's training with the team. Well, a couple weeks later, we get ready for her first match, and she comes home the night before and she says, Mom and Dad, I think I'm going to be playing JV singles number 1. And we're like, what? She's like, I know. And our hearts are sinking, right? We're like, oh my gosh. Like, do her coaches know that she's only been playing a couple years? And so, and we're excited for her, right? And so she gets in and she plays and really does well. But I'm telling you, she's playing, in some cases, students like 2-3 years older than her. I mean, a lot of times JV, first singles is like juniors, seniors have been playing, and it's evident. And then at times, as we get in the season, she gets called up to play varsity. She's the alternate for varsity. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's gonna be playing some of the top players in the state, and she does. And she gets annihilated. I mean, I'm talking donuts on the scoreboard. All right, donuts. She's coming home and just in tears. I should have done this right. I did this wrong. My coach is going to demote me. Da, 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 da. And in that moment, our job is to not focus on perfection, but to focus on progress. And so we looked at her and said, okay, do you understand though, Meredith, when you're out there playing, yes, that was a struggle. And yes, you got beat. And yes, you've got a lot of development. But these girls, they've been playing longer than you have. They have more skills. It's very evident. But guess what? You are growing. Every time you're thrown into that fire, guess what? I see you grow 6 inches. She's like, really? And she all of a sudden gets a big smile on her face because she needs to see that she's actually making progress. I've got a friend I do the same for spiritually. Been discipling him for a number of years. And when I say discipling, we just meet, we talk about faith, and he'll say to me often, he'll say, hey, Curt, I wish I experienced God the way that I see God show up in your life. And I'll say to him, oh my gosh, you do. You just don't know how to interpret it. And he's like, no, I don't experience those things. And I'd go through and start listing all the ways I see God active in his life. And he's just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know how to interpret it. One of the greatest things we can give to those we're raising up is interpretation. In fact, Paul says in one of his letters to the Philippians, he says, I'm not saying that I have all this together, that I've made it. He says, I'm well on my way. I'm reaching out for Christ, who has so wondrously reached out to me. Like, we're not in this journey alone. But he says, friends, don't get me wrong. By no means do I count myself an expert in all of this, but I've got my eye on the goal. One of our jobs in the raising the faith of the next generation is to help them keep their eye on the goal and to see their progress. And so we have to ask ourselves, in those I'm raising, those who have the opportunity to raise up, how am I interpreting their progress to them? Now, the second move that we have to make on this new report card is we have to move from valuing faith development to being intentional in faith development. Let me tell you a story about the difference between valuing something and intentionality. A couple years ago, when my daughters were a little younger, I would drop them off at school every now and then. Not often. We usually wouldn't drop them off. They'd ride the bus. But 2 different days in a row, I had to drop one of them at one school and one of them the next day at the other school, across the road from each other, right here on Oleo Road. And if you've ever been out there at the start of the school day, it is crazy. And so the one school, I sit there and go through the parking lot, and I'd always come out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like every time I get to pulling out onto this crazy busy road, I feel lost. I feel like I'm doing the wrong thing. I feel like people are mad at me. If I'm trying to turn left, I'm like, maybe I made the wrong decision because everybody's honking. And I just have this anxiety that rises. But it was crazy because the next day I took my other daughter to her school across the street, and it was the same context, same road, same time, same traffic issues. But I'm sitting in the parking lot going, oh my gosh, this is an entirely different experience. And here was why. Because when I got to the exit of the parking lot, they required everyone to turn right. There was no option there to go left and clog the traffic. They just required you to go right. Now, if I'm honest, I don't always want to go right. But I can figure that out. I can figure out how to get back going the other direction. But I discovered that when there's intentionality, all of a sudden my stress and my anxiety and clarity on where I'm going actually increases. So we can't underestimate the power of intentionality. Think about all the areas you're intentional with those you're raising. I mean, we're intentional in checking skyward, right? We're intentional in checking, Canvas and making sure projects are getting in on time. We're intentional with athletic development, right? Making sure they're at the lessons, their practices, getting signed up for teams. We're intentional with the arts, making sure they're at the piano lessons, you're attending the dance, the class, not just the recitals, because we know if you just show up at the recital, all right, there's a lot of development that happens behind the scenes so you're ready to perform. Well, it is the same when it comes to the spiritual development. And there's all kinds of ways we can do spiritual development. I mean, we partner with you as parents. I mean, part of what a church does is partner with you with parents. And you can do that at home and having devotions as a family. You can do that by having dinner table conversations. Dinner table leadership is what we call it. You can have nightly prayers with your kids. But here's the reality. I know many of us, we're like, I'm busy. I don't always hit it. All right, our lives are full. And so the cool thing, that's where we as a church community come alongside and actually partner with you on this. And I just want to give you a slow pitch. I want to give you one of the greatest ways that you can actually build a sustaining faith in your children. All right, you ready? Just show up. Just show up here at Crosspoint. Even if for no other reason, show up on Sunday so your kids can actually go to Crosspoint Kids. Now, here's why I say that. Every single week, we're teaching them some virtue straight out of the life of Jesus or God's intention for their lives. In fact, if your kids are in Crosspoint Kids this weekend and toddlers or preschool, you know what they're going to be learning about? They're going to be learning from the prophet Deborah, who was called by God to actually lead the Israelites and to show them what it means to follow God. And they're going to learn the bottom line. These are 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. They're going to learn the bottom line that God helps me when I do big things. All right? Now, that's going to pay off in life sometime, right? And we're going to help that land in their lives. We volunteers are going to help make that happen. If you have kids in the elementary environments, Upstreet and Area 56, they're going to be learning about initiative. All right, initiative, seeing what needs to be done and doing it. All right, now, just tell me, how many parents wouldn't love to see initiative in their kids? Make some noise if you'd like to see that in your kids. Initiative, yeah. I mean, that's something we all want to see, right? They're going to be looking at the story of Jesus and the talents and how Jesus says, hey, I give everyone talents and you use those things I put in your life to actually honor me, but also to bless others. I mean, every environment, every weekend, we're landing these things and the kids walk these out and what it means to do this throughout their week. And the other cool thing, every environment from the 2-year-olds all the way up through our seniors in high school at CSM have a small group experience where they're sitting together in community, not just sitting and getting, but they're actually learning to operate in community the way God designed the human race to go. Now, let me give you 2 pictures of why this is so important. A month ago, we had Easter here at Crosspoint. In fact, across the world. We had 16 baptisms that weekend. How cool was that? 16 baptisms. So cool. Now, 6 of those were students and children from Crosspoint, and 3 of those were kids that have exclusively, they've not gone to any other church but Crosspoint. This is where they've been raised. And they came to the place through that training and partnering with their parents to say, hey, one of the best things I can do is make the decision to follow Jesus. In fact, when they step in the waters of baptism, that's what I tell them. This is one of the best things you can ever decide. All right, and so they actually grow in that awareness by being in proximity in a spiritual environment that's helping them see that that's God's plan for their life. Now, something else really cool happened on Easter weekend. I got a text from one of my friends late Easter afternoon, and I talked to him that morning. He said, oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to send you this video from State College in Pennsylvania. And so he sent me a video from his daughter, who is a sophomore there at Penn State. I want to show it to you real quick. Take a look at this right here.
Happy Easter to all those who celebrate. While I am very disappointed that I am not able to be in person for this wonderful and amazing sermon and service today, I'm going to be doing my own version of leaving the old and walking in with the new. The words that I have selected to leave in the old is rejection, exclusion, hatred, anger, and confusion. So today, since I don't have a cloth and I rather have access to pencil and paper, I will be taking these things that I wrote down on here, leaving them in the old and walking into the new. Walking in with a new vision of kingdom eyes with the kingdom of God. Happy Easter to all those who celebrate.
Hey, let's give a big shout out to Olivia White right there. Wow, is that not so cool? So cool. Now here's why I wanted you to see that. Do you realize that Olivia is a student that grew up here from the youngest of years? And she's now in a season where she gets to decide and has a choice on what she's going to do with her faith. As a 19, 20-year-old, she's actually living out a sustainable faith. I remember when Guy and Tina, her parents, were back in 2006 joining our launch team when we were starting Crosspoint from the ground up. In fact, here's a little picture of Olivia and her brother Solomon in our pre-K environment. A little 3-year-old Olivia, 4-year-old Solomon right there. And now here's the cool thing. All right, they spent their years growing up through Crosspoint Kids, Crosspoint Student Ministries. Guy and Tina, if they were here, they would tell you, hey, it has not always been the smoothest of roads. But what I can tell you is they were intentional in making sure their kids had proximity to an environment where they're learning about Jesus with other children, learning and growing in a faith that will be sustainable for their life. I'm telling you, just showing up, getting your kids in these environments, it makes a difference. Proximity matters. Now, let me just do a little vision drip right here real quick. Let me tell you what else matters. These environments, in order for them to be effective, it takes willing volunteers. Willing volunteers. Now notice I didn't say highly trained volunteers. I didn't say highly talented volunteers. I just said willing. People who are willing to say, hey, I can get on a floor and I can take some notes and I can help kids make connections on what it means to know and follow God. Now, the reason I say that is, I don't know if you know this or not, but we're always one generation away from our faith going extinct. It takes willing individuals to serve and to be others focused and to be a little bit inconvenienced, to show up early, to sit out in a kid's environments 1 hour while attending a service another hour. Did I say it's a little inconvenient? I mean, perhaps attending twice on a weekend and the paycheck, there's no paycheck for that, but there is a payoff. The payoff is the faith of the next generation. In fact, our team, we ask the question all the time, what is the faith of the next generation worth? And we think it's worth a lot. And so, you might be sitting here going, I think it's worth a lot as well. Maybe you want to be a part of one of those teams. In fact, in your weekly tonight, there's a volunteer card. You can look through this, and if you want to join one of our kids' teams, we would love to help you be a part of helping those students grow in a sustainable faith that will carry them into their adult years. If you're tuning in online, you've got a QR code there. You can let us know if you want to come and serve on any given weekend. We would love to help you get engaged. Now, the last shift, the last move that I want to lift up for us on this report card is the move from self-focus to others' focus. In fact, Dr. Elmore, he says, anxiety feeds narcissism and narcissism feeds anxiety. Now, what's narcissism? Narcissism is an excessive preoccupation with ourselves. Meaning when we get so focused on ourselves, when our students get so focused on themselves, it actually leads to poor mental health, which usually bleeds into depression, which cycles back to even worse mental health. In fact, Dr. Christine Carter, she's a sociologist, author, she says, again and again, research has shown that even in dire circumstances, we feel better when we turn our attention to supporting others. This is true for teenagers as well. It's not surprising that teens who provide tangible, emotional, and informational support to people in crisis tend to feel more strongly connected to their community. They cope with their own challenges more effectively, and they feel more supported by others. In fact, a few years ago, one of our kids went through a really, really difficult patch. And if we're honest, Julie and I, as parents, I don't know that we coached them the best through that path. I mean, we were kind of digging for some tools in that season as well. Through a number of conversations with our kid, they were just like, man, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And one day, it just hit us. We said, okay, here's what you need to do tomorrow. Tomorrow, when you show up at school, we want you to look for someone that you need to come alongside, someone who needs somebody in their life, maybe somebody at the lunch table who's sitting by themselves, and just go introduce yourself to them and see if you can actually create a little sense of belonging. Maybe it's in the afternoon when you get to sports practice. Maybe it's looking for somebody who's a bit down and coming alongside and cheering them up. And they're like, yeah, but I mean, I'm the one struggling. I'm like, I know you're the one struggling, but it's crazy what begins to happen when we get our eyes outside of ourselves and we begin to focus on someone else. Our anxieties and our sense of weightiness begins to dissipate. Now, if I'm honest, it didn't solve that difficult patch, but it's amazing how it begins to shift the narrative. And here's the reality, man, it doesn't matter what age we are, right? I mean, it does all of us good when we choose to live for something and someone bigger than ourselves. In fact, I heard it said recently that, and I wish I could tell you who it was. I can't for the life of me remember who said this. They said, our children, when they grow up in churches that are others first focused, that constantly look at the life of Jesus and follow Jesus through the Gospels and the way he always puts others first. He always says, I want you to love others. I want you to treat others the way not only that you want to be treated, but the way I treated you. He said, when we teach our children under these circumstances, he says, there will always be hope for the next generation. See, Jesus always championed an others first culture. And the systems of our world, the systems of our culture, the values of our culture, the values of our government, the values of our financial system, these are always going to be in direct conflict with the ways of Jesus. Right? Jesus never tried to change Rome. Never once did he say, hey, let's change Rome. He said, no, we're going to raise kingdom-minded children that turn into kingdom-minded adults that go out and be light in and for the world. And when they do this, it also grows in them a sustainable faith, regardless of the circumstances that come. One more quote I want to share with you as we wrap up. Brene Brown, you may be familiar with her. She's a research psychologist. She says, we are constantly telling a story to ourselves about who we are, about how we're doing, about this internal narrative of our confidence levels, about our relationships, our quality of life, including narratives about our confidence in God and whether he really does see us or care about us. And when it comes to our students, it's crucial that we help shape these internal narratives. And so the question isn't, are our students going to carry a narrative, all right, inside of them? I mean, they're going to carry a narrative. The question is, are they going to carry a narrative that causes them to be a victim when circumstances hit? Or are they going to carry a narrative that allows them to be an overcomer when circumstances hit? And see, this is where you and I get involved, because this is where it depends on you and I. Because this is the opportunity that you and I have to decide with the somebodies that we're raising or that we're raising up. How do we help them tell a better story? In fact, John Maxwell, he says, nobody finishes well by accident. And so I want to give you some next steps today. In fact, I want you to go ahead and take out your connection card. And if you did this digitally, these are at the bottom of the digital form. There's some next steps. I just want to encourage you to pick one this weekend. What's one thing I can do with whoever you're raising up? Whether it's in your home or in your workplace, whoever you're raising, what's one thing, just one shift you can make this week that perhaps can better equip and empower the next generation, specifically in their faith? Maybe one of those things is picking up Carol DeWick's book and reading the book Mindset. I'm telling you, it's been a game changer for me. Maybe for some of us, it's just showing up next weekend. All right, next weekend, that's something we all can do. We can come back. We're going to be wrapping this series up. Let me tell you about next weekend. We're going to be talking about the discipline of celebrating. Here's the crazy thing. Desperate times where we have ongoing desperation and despair requires ongoing celebration. We're going to take a look at how whenever we feel under the weight of life, that requires more celebrating. It's going to be fun. We're going to look at how we continue to see God at work even in the midst of the difficult. All right, so I hope you come back and join us for Memorial Day weekend, Race Day weekend, and our adjusted service schedule. All right, let's go ahead and stand to our feet. I want to pray for us, and the band's going to lead us in one more song. God, I just want to thank you for these pictures that you have given us through people like Dr. Elmore and pictures from Jesus and people like the Apostle Paul who had a heart for raising up people, building people. That's the work that you're in, building people. And so, God, I just pray that you help us to know what to do with what we've heard today. And I specifically ask, God, for any adult who is here today and they're just feeling like, man, I don't know that I've done this well. God, I just pray that you give them a step to take this week. Maybe encourage their spirit. Even if their child is an adult child now, God, would you give them a next step? Maybe a conversation they can have this week and maybe take that relationship to a new place. And God, for our students, for our children, God, I just pray, as has been prayed over me so many times, God, would you just raise them up? Would you give them evidence that you're with them? Would you allow them to make enough mistakes that they can learn and they can grow? But would you protect them from any that would have lifelong consequences? Father, you know what we need today. I just pray that you bring us what we need. And if any of us are just feeling like, perhaps all hope is lost on this front, God, would you remind us that you work in graveyards? In fact, this is where you do your best work, bringing things that are seemingly dead and burned down back to new places. And so, God, I just pray that you encourage us, strengthen us today, I pray.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Take a moment to follow our podcast on your preferred platform, and be sure to download our app to stay informed on everything happening here at Crosspoint. And if you like what you heard today, don't hesitate to share it with a friend that might need to hear it too.